Oh, welcome to the Empress's Ball, my friend. The evening's festivities shall consist of Ole's finest intrigue in politics. Eh, I can't tell if they're French or Italian. Oh my god, fuck this mask. The nose isn't even right. Get it off me. Get it off. We're done. We're done. Fuck it. We're done. Jesus Christ. Gamers, welcome back. This is the fifth installment of a chronicle, if you will, of my journey through Dragon Age Inquisition. Now, right up front, I'm going to want to let you know, if you haven't seen the previous video diaries, do not worry. At this point, I've gotten a good chunk of game under my belt, and a lot of my feelings and impressions of the game have sort of developed and are really starting to solidify, I think, this week. So I'm going to go over all of it. Every week I go over all of it. If you're interested in seeing like how my opinions have changed over, my entire playthrough, obviously you're welcome to go back and watch, but I don't want you guys to feel like you're missing out on anything. You're getting the full load today. Crazy. All right, one more disclaimer before we continue. I've said it before. I haven't said it yet in this video. I'm a Dragon Age virgin, okay? Dragon Age Inquisition is my first Dragon Age, so that's kind of a big deal, I think, in this game. There are a lot of big deal moments that kind of tend to fall flat for me. I'm just telling you guys this so that you know to take my experience for what it is, right? There are definitely people out there who are bigger Dragon Age nerds, who know more about the lore, who probably have opinions that in some ways are more valuable than mine, of course, but I think there's value in going into Inquisition kind of blind, especially right before the release of the next big installment, right? Veilguard coming out in about a month. So take that for what it is, and with all that out of the way, let's finally get on with the video game diary, whatever we're calling these. Okay, so another little piece of news for the first timers here. Every one of these video game diaries, I want to make sure that I'm including a major main story beat. I'm gonna go ahead and just get it out of the way now. We've played this is our fifth week now, and so it's our fifth big main story quest, and I think I'm fairly certain at this point, and I'm saying this with a good amount of confidence, I think this is the weakest main story quest yet. First off, this is our first time meeting Selene, and I'm gonna do a quick callback now to a previous video that we did. There was a video we did where we did a time travel mission into the future to see what the future would be like if the Inquisition was unsuccessful, if we lost to our main antagonist Corypheus, and it was a very bleak future. And I counted that, even though we never actually saw Corypheus, never met him face to face, I counted that as an introduction to Corypheus. And the reason I did was because that told us a lot about him without us actually having to speak with him face to face. With Selene, there's like a good contrast to be made against that introduction with Corypheus, where I just don't think we've had really any big story moments or big story beats that have come up that will introduce us to Selene. Obviously not in the way that we were introduced to Corypheus, but really just to stop us from being introduced to her kind of at all. Like, I don't know anything about her, right? We spent the majority of the beginning of the game in the hinterlands and on the Storm Coast. There's that one desert one. As we kind of have gone about those regions, I haven't really heard too much or heard mention of Empress Selene. Maybe in passing here and there, like just to like kind of affirm that she is indeed the Empress, but we don't know that much about her. We don't know too much about her policies. So this mission, at what I assume is probably like a good chunk, like maybe about halfway into the game at least, this is really our first meeting with her. And this is our first time that we're actually like forming any opinion. I think it's a little late in the game, especially because she's such a political figure. It's a little weird that we don't seem to have, I don't feel like I've been given much of an impression of her up to this point. I think that definitely doesn't help this mission as part of like the story. And another thing that I think really holds this back is a few like obtuse / pointless kind of like mechanics in the game, like court approval or gathering secrets. These mechanics that they're only for this mission, right? The idea that like we have to spend time around, the nobility so that we keep up our court approval. That as a mechanic is a little bit weird. I think a stronger way to have done this story would have been to have us attend the ball, have an introduction with the Grand Duke, Gaspard, who I believe is actually the cousin of the Empress, and he's kind of like public suspect numero uno, right? I think he, in his mind at least, he thinks he's the rightful heir to the throne. In his view, his cousin Celine has sort of usurped him, and so, you know, as we were talking to our allies before we go into the ball, he seems like a very likely candidate for someone who maybe wants to, you know, take out a hit on the Empress Celine. So we have a lot of suspicion on him, right? Now, as we kind of go about through the rest of the mission, I think it's really hindered by a lot of the gameplay structures. I think it would have been a lot stronger if we had gotten our introduction, we attend the ball, we're wearing our fancy little outfits, we meet the Empress, right? And then I think it would have been stronger if at that point the gameplay had maybe had like a little bit more of like, okay, now mingle around the ball for a little bit. And then we have like a hard cut to, and now you're on the exterior of the palace. Now you're sneaking around. Now the rest of the mission, you don't have to worry about court approval. You just have to worry about uncovering the mystery. I think maybe chopping it into two more distinct halves maybe would have worked. This is all like kind of Monday morning quarterbacking. To be honest, I'm not sure that actually would have been better. I'll kind of just leave it there. I think there was just a lot working against enjoyment in this quest in the way that in a way that hasn't really been present in previous ones, right? Like a week ago, we did the quest where we fought against the wardens who had kind of been tricked into joining forces with Corypheus, which was, I think, a lot more interesting of a quest. It went by a lot quicker, and it was just like a lot more like action-packed, a lot more exciting. Yeah, I don't mean to belabor the point. Let's just get through it. The idea is not the strongest quest. Anyways, to summarize the whole Empress assassination plot, grand ball thing real quick. So we're invited to the ball by Grand Duke Gaspard. Obviously, I've said that already. He's suspect numero uno. Suspecto numero dos is Briala, an elvish ambassador who has a history with the Empress. And we spend most of the ball trying to figure out, like, between the two of these, who seems most likely to align with Corypheus or Cory, our main antagonist, to try to have the Empress assassinated to throw Orlais into chaos. Eventually, we do find out that it's actually both of them are red herrings, and it's the Empress's cousin and Gaspard's sister, I believe, Lady Floriane, who ends up being the one who has aligned with Cory in order to assassinate the Empress. We expose her in front of the whole court. It's a really triumphant moment. She gets taken away by guards, and I did my best to try to get it so that the Empress and Briala, the elvish lady, could reconcile their relationship. Anyways, the Empress basically takes her word for it, and the day is saved. The day is won. In theory, it's not the worst plot, okay? It's not really bad. I think it's kind of mid, but I think it's really held back by, one, the length. We spend a lot of time doing this. There's a lot of people to talk to. There's a lot of people to eavesdrop on. There are a lot of, I think they're called court secrets to find, which are like very difficult little secrets that you have to like basically constantly ping surroundings for. And the radius on finding them is like very small. So sometimes you have to be like standing right on top of them to actually find them. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is just kind of a chore. I didn't really enjoy this one very much. Unlike the last mission where we had to go into the Fade with Hawk and the other previous protagonists, this one didn't seem to have like quite as many callbacks. At one point, I will say we did meet Morrigan, and she did offer us some advice, and that was probably cool if you had played the last two games and if you know who she is. I don't, but I could tell just by her entrance that she's a very important character. Other than that, though, there doesn't seem to be like too much of a callback to other games. Because we haven't spent too much time on Orlais, or at least I haven't in this playthrough, a lot of the consequences of this just kind of felt like very foreign and very like unimportant. Just overall, I think one of the weaker main story quests in this game, unfortunately. Not totally terrible. I think they were on to a lot of interesting stuff, and I think if they had spent maybe a little bit more time kind of like trimming some fat in this mission, I think it could have been really good. Anyways, moving on from the main story quest stuff, putting all that behind us, or actually kind of in front of us, because before we did the main story quest, we actually did a whole bunch of companion quests, right? So if you've played Dragon Age Inquisition, you'll probably be aware that each main story quest requires a certain amount of power for you to progress each quest and for you to actually undertake each quest. The main way that I've been doing it this game, because I'm trying to do a playthrough in a shorter amount of time than I probably would otherwise if I wasn't streaming or making this for content, and also if I wasn't trying to finish this before Veilguard comes out next month. But anyways, one of the main ways that I've been trying to accrue power in this playthrough is through doing the companion quests, right? However, I don't have all the time in the world to play this game, so I'm kind of picking and choosing my companion quests that I'm going to be undertaking. I'm going to talk about a handful of them today, some of the ones that I've made the most progress with. If you have any suggestions, though, for companion quests that you really want to see done, leave it in the comments. Go follow me on Twitch. That's where I'm streaming my playthrough of the game. Talk to me about it. Let me know, because I'm mostly going in blind, but if you have suggestions of ones that really need to get done, go ahead and let me know. I'd really appreciate it. Okay, starting off, this is actually not one that we really have a quest for, or one that we've progressed a lot in this portion of our playthrough, but I want to talk about it because the last thing that we did last week was actually go into the Fade with Varric and Shroud, and Shroud being like a stand-in for the first Dragon Age game, and we had to pick one of them to live and one of them to die. And not knowing that Shroud was not that actually important of a character, that he was very much a stand-in guy, I ended up telling Hawk to stay behind and sacrifice his life. My editor's never gonna forgive me for that, by the way.
I will never forgive you for this. Never, ever, ever!
And neither is Varric, actually, I don't think. He was really upset by that decision, and then next time I confronted him after that main story quest, he sort of spilled his guts about one instance where I guess some bandits had come to exact some type of vengeance on Hawk or something that like his cousin or uncle had done, and Hawk, just with his charisma, he rolled a d20 and he managed to get by totally unscathed. And I apologize because my retelling of the story isn't as good as Varric's, but I think listening to Varric tell this story was one of the best voice acting performances I've heard in a video game. It was one of those instances of like, the story I'm listening to isn't that interesting, isn't that significant, especially to me as someone who like did not play the previous game, has no connection to Hawk as a character. Varric, and I guess Varric's voice actor, really sold me on Hawk as a person in just this one performance.
Leandra, Hawk's mother, made them tea, and for the next 2 hours tried to get them to make small talk. They wandered out of the house in a daze. No idea what just happened. Never came back. Hawk just had that effect on people. I always wanted to tell that one. Thanks. I guess I've got some letters to write. Carver should be told. Excuse me.
I think Varric reliving that moment, retelling that story about Hawk was just great. I thought it was great. It's one of those things that I don't think most people are going to come away from this game having remembered it as like, wow, that was a really cool moment when like it was so epic, or that was so cool when so-and-so did that, you know, like, because there's no action in it. It's literally just Varric retelling a story, but I think it just came across so well and so heartfelt that I couldn't not give it a shout out here. Sometimes the writing in this game is excellent, and this was one of those moments. Moving on, we progressed a handful of companions stories in this leg of our playthrough. I'm gonna start with Cole, okay? So Cole we encounter in the little courtyard of Skyhold. I think he's bothering Solus, and he wants Solus to bind him. I think this is a good point for me to mention that I'm really not that familiar with a lot of Dragon Age lore, and I think this is a good point to remind you guys of that and point out that if you are not like very up to speed with a lot of Dragon Age lore, then a lot of moments in some of these quests are just gonna kind of go right over your head. And this is one of those, right? Cole is in the courtyard asking Solus to bind him, And here I am thinking, like, what do you mean? Like in a straitjacket? Like, what do you mean bind you? Like with a rope? What are we talking about here? But it's just not made clear to us through context that exactly what this is. You know, and if this is your first Dragon Age, you might kind of struggle to figure out what exactly is going on here, or at least I did, right? But anyways, kind of moving on with that, Solus does suggest that we go out and find an amulet. It's kind of nondescript about it, to protect Cole from being bound. So we go out and do that. This amulet doesn't seem to work once we bring it back to Cole. So instead, what we end up doing is seeking out the source of his, I'm just going to call it his teenage angst, who happens to be a guard who locked away the body of young Cole in a tower and forgot about him and left him to starve and die, I guess. Cole, being a spirit who I guess was friends with the person who previously inhabited this body, I guess was really traumatized by this, because now inhabiting the body, he has the memories of this boy who was basically killed by this guard. Again, it's not really super clear unless you're very familiar with like spirits and the way they work in this game. It's not incredibly clear what's going on. But regardless, the game did kind of take me on a quest where we tracked down that guard who let I'm just gonna call him the original Cole, the OC, who put the OC in a tower and let him die. We go out and track that guy. I'm just gonna be honest, I didn't love this quest. This might be a little controversial. I've heard that Cole is like a little bit of a fan favorite, but I'm gonna be honest, maybe it's that I'm not following his story super clearly, but I also just don't think that this quest does a great job at juxtapositioning the two choices that you have to make, right? Once you find the guard who killed the Cole of the past, you have the option of don't let Cole kill this man, or hang on, you can not let Cole kill this man. So you have two options, right? And the game kind of like, it takes Varric and Solus along with you, and it positions it as you can side with Varric and not let Cole kill the man, or you can side with Solus and not let Cole kill the man. And it's like, what are we talking about? What's the difference here? For a lot of Inquisition, I have found that not having played the previous games and not being super familiar with the lore is not that big of an issue. Usually, 9 times out of 10. This is the 1 out of 10. When the game gave me that option of don't let Cole kill the guy or don't let Cole kill the guy, that was pretty difficult for me. And I basically ended up just kind of basing it off of, what does Varric want me to do? I felt really, really bad for letting Hawk die beforehand, so I kind of just wanted to make it up to Varric. So that's what I did. I picked the option that aligned with Varric, which was to not really let Cole kill the guy, which ended up giving me a cutscene where I let Cole and Varric corner the man. And this part is like really inexplicable for me. It's really tough, and I did not like this at all. In this next cutscene that follows this decision being made, and Cole confronts him with a lot of anger, a lot of vigor, and Varric helps Cole work through his issues, gives Cole the crossbow off of his back, and he says, "Here you go, kid. Shoot that motherfucker and kill him." And because of the camera angles used in this cutscene, we're not shown the top part of this crossbow. We're not shown the part of the crossbow that would let us know if it's actually loaded with a bolt or not, right? So Varric gives him the crossbow. He tells him, point it at him and fucking kill him, boy. And then Cole literally does that. He points the crossbow right at the dude. He shoots him, right? And again, because this is like sort of like just out of frame of the camera, it's not clear whether or not the crossbow actually shoots anything at the guy. But after Cole pulls the trigger, Varric asks him, "Do you feel better now?" And Cole goes, "No, I don't feel better." And then he cries a little bit and they both leave. And so does the guy. So apparently the crossbow that Varric hands him wasn't loaded. But at no point during the cutscene are we really shown that. And I think this is like, it could be a limitation of the game from like, 2014, like in engine, we don't have the technology to kind of like make this cutscene work cinematically the way we want it to. That could be it. Regardless, it's one of those things where it just doesn't translate very well to the viewer, like what's happening. And I want to put aside like how much I don't really care for Cole as a character, because I've heard a lot of people really like him. My editor Jen seems to absolutely love him, and I'm sure that like if I spend a little bit more time bringing him along on missions, hearing his in-game dialogue, I'm sure that I would be endeared to him. That's happened with like other characters for me, like Blackwell. I'm sure Cole would kind of get that same kind of treatment, but I just don't. And the way that this cutscene plays out and how unclear and ambiguous it is, I think it's a real problem. Obviously the game's 10 years old. I don't expect them to like go back and fix this or anything, but I think it's a real issue. I think this really does a disservice to endearing people to Cole, especially if they haven't like had the chance to like bring him into their party. Anyways, Cole's one person. He's like one of so many that we actually progressed this week. Cassandra, she's another one that we did. She wanted us to help her hunt down some of the Seekers, I think that's her faction, is the Seekers, who seem to just be like sword and board using warrior types. This week we finally finished hunting down all of her targets, and so we were finally able to hunt down Lord Seeker Lucius, who turns out in the beginning of the game, that guy who punched that nun in the face in that one city, turns out that wasn't him. Turns out that was a demon that Lord Seeker Lucius had let possess him to go to the capital in his stead. Interesting plot development. Nevertheless, we're gonna have to go ahead and hunt him down and kill him, because that's just part of Sandra's quest. Aside from him just being like the target of Sandra, who's our baby girl, who is our queen, who I absolutely have come to love, he has also allied the Seekers with a death cult that is trying to bring about the end of the world. And in hunting him down, we encounter one of Sandra's old Padawans who is like bleeding out on the floor inside a temple, and she has to basically like end his suffering. Eventually we catch up with Lucius, we destroy him. I do feel bad because I'm starting out like the companion section with Cole and with Sandra, and to be honest, I feel like these quests are a couple of the weaker ones, where Cole's quests, obviously the cutscenes have their own problems. Sandra, I think her cutscenes are okay. I think her quest is more or less fine, but I think that Lucius himself is an underdeveloped villain, especially considering that guy that we ran into in the beginning of the game turns out not to even have been him. That was like a demon possessing his body or something like that. It just kind of makes the whole thing feel a little bit like underdeveloped. Once she does kill him though, she grabs a book of the Seekers off of his body. From this book, she learns that her entire order has basically been covering up like horrific secrets for the longest time. And she takes a vow to reform her order in just in a more responsible way. That in itself, I think, is a pretty interesting story, but I have a feeling that we're not going to get like a really solid conclusion until the next game, but we'll see. I could be wrong. Anyways, moving on, we have a lot of companions to get through. Red Jenny, okay? Red Jenny had a request earlier on for us to march a small squadron of soldiers through some rural town. Why did we have to do that? What was the purpose exactly? Dude, I don't fucking remember. But she's part of like the Friends of Red Jenny, and they just do this kind of thing. So I said, sure, why not? Let's do it. I don't care. Listen, there's kind of a common theme you're gonna see with like the next few companion quests, and it's that when my companions request something, I have a little bit of loyalty to them, and so I'm kind of just gonna go along, even if it's not necessarily the thing that I would do. This is like a very BioWare mechanic, and I actually really like this when they take advantage of this in quests, right? Where sometimes your companions want something, you can see the justification for them wanting it, but them carrying out their desires isn't maybe necessarily the best thing. BioWare does this like really excellently sometimes, and this game is no exception, right? So Red Jenny, she has us march a squad through some rural town. That doesn't seem to work, so we end up taking her along with a couple other friends to march personally through the town, and when we do, her contact basically gives us up and says, Red Jenny's here, it's time to kill her, go ahead and do it. And upon learning that Red Jenny is actually an ally of the Inquisitor, the person who has taken out a hit on Red Jenny reveals himself and offers an alliance to us, basically. I'm really curious to see how the rest of you guys responded to this, and maybe it's just because I kind of liked the guy. I thought it was kind of funny. I totally would have let him be an ally of the Inquisition. Listen, he was just pissed off that the Red Jenny people were like interfering in his business, and I can agree with that. Fuck these people, all right? Yeah, no, listen. Okay, actually, this is a really hot take. I can totally empathize with the guy who wanted to kill Red Jenny. I totally can. Red Jenny seems like a total pain in the ass, like a thorn in my side if I've ever met one. And I totally would have leveraged the fact that I was Inquisitor to get him to like stop being a prick and to just join our cause. I think that probably would have been the move that I would have done. I think that's like a little bit more pragmatic. But you know what? I decided to say, you know what, Red Jenny, you go ahead. I can tell you probably want to kill this guy. Go ahead and do it. And I think that's something that BioWare does really, really well. That's something I want to really praise in this video, is that oftentimes quests in BioWare games will not fall along very clear, like black and white lines, right? It's not like, oh, you can free the forever oppressed slaves, or you can bound them to eternal servitude. It's more like, yeah, you can free the slaves, in which case they're going to kill their slave master and his entire family and all of his friends, or you can keep them in bondage, but at least they won't die and they'll be treated better, but also like you're saving like a whole family line, you know, like they'll try to put you in these situations where it's like there's no choice to make that is 100% upsides and no downsides, right? I think this is really like punctuated by, and this has nothing to do with the Red Jenny quest, but there's a conversation that I had with Dorian this week where he's telling me about Tevinter, and he's talking about how slavery, while it's still legal in Tevinter, is kind of like an institution that's really hard to get rid of, because if you got rid of slavery, what do you do with all these slaves? Well, they just become like an impoverished underclass, of course, right? Because they don't have any money to their name, they're slaves. And if they don't have, you know, slavery as a system in place, well, not only do they now not have any money, but they don't have any work, they don't have any land that they own, they don't have any shelter, they don't have any way to provide for their families. It's a really good way of presenting the world in shades of gray that I think BioWare is just like really famous for. Like Mass Effect 2 did this a whole bunch, KOTOR did this bunch, making the player grapple with the reality of there not being like a 100% totally correct decision all the time. I really appreciate that in games, and I think I really appreciate that here. Interestingly, going off of that kind of notion, the last companion that I want to talk about is Solus, okay? Now, Solus is the first, and I think so far the only member of our harem. I started this quest with the objective of making all of our companions part of a harem. I'm not sure how confident I am in that still happening, but listen, at the very least, we're gonna have Solus, okay? He kissed us again earlier in our playthrough this week. That's a plus. But we also went with him to help save a spirit friend of his who we hadn't heard from recently, one who had been bound by mages so that they could use that spirit for protection as they traveled. In doing so, they actually turned that spirit into a demon, and it seemed as though, at least at first it seemed as though, we might have to kill that spirit. This is actually another good point that I want to plan about game plan real quick. When I was approaching this quest, I think I approached from like across a river or something, and I jumped up some rocks to get to this, you know, quest objective in like a seemingly unconventional way. And in doing so, I actually did not trigger the cutscene that was needed to progress the quest. I showed up, there was a demon just like kneeling on the floor and not acknowledging me, and I was very, very, very confused. So I left in a different direction and then came back from that direction, and then the cutscene triggered. And I just, the reason I'm pointing this out is because in previous videos, I've complained about the open world of this game and how it seems kind of buggy, the way that it like really forces you to like choose one avenue to get to like your objective sometimes. This is, I think, like an inexcusable way of doing that. You know, if you want to make it so that your objective is within a cave and there's only one entrance to that cave, and so you have to go through that entrance to trigger the cutscene, sure, fine, whatever. But I really didn't appreciate that there are multiple ways to get to this, you know, objective, but for some reason only one worked. Yeah, if you've been watching some of these video diaries as I've gone along in my Dragon Age Inquisition playthrough, you're going to notice that I'm really not a big fan of the open world. I really kind of hate it, and I think that position, or that opinion of mine, has been solidified this week. I really do not like the open world. Anyways, stupid little rant aside, once I did trigger the cutscene, and once we did get to the actual meat of this quest, we were presented with an option: kill the demon or free it. This is another good example of where, had I been left to my own devices, had this just been a quest that I approach in the open world as, you know, a blank slate, as someone who's not familiar with any of the parties involved, I may have said, listen, I get that you love this demon very much, but like, it's a demon. We're gonna fucking kill it, dog. I felt like I didn't have like the leeway to say that though, because Solus, he's my companion, he's a friend of mine, he's frankly the only member of my harem so far. I really can't put that shit in jeopardy, okay? It's really important to me that I romance as many of these companions as I can. So, listen, I have to keep Solus happy, so I decided to, okay, we're gonna destroy the little stones around the demon, and we're gonna free it. And thankfully, that wasn't too tall of a task. We were able to do that. We were able to free the spirit from the grasp of being a demon. And then afterwards, when Solus felt like exacting some revenge against those mages, I decided to let him go full Anakin. And goddamn, I think it was really cool. Previously, we had let Red Jenny go full Anakin on that one rich guy in her quest, which was fine. It was satisfying enough, but letting Solus go like full Anakin on these mages was really awesome. I've noticed a lot of times in this game where sometimes people will die like just out of frame or just off screen. This was probably one of the best examples of that, where the camera cuts away from Solus, it cuts to us, then it cuts back to him with the mages on the floor, their bodies aflame. And you can just tell, like, there's no like red aura around him, there's no shiny light, there's no like gameplay mechanic that's telling us this, but you can just tell, like, this man is seething, he is crossing a line, and something within him has actually changed. I just loved this moment. I thought it was so good. I think this was probably, despite the systematic issues with, you know, approaching the quest from the right angle on the map, I think this was probably my favorite companion quest of this leg of my journey. All right, moving on, beyond companion quests, there's one other thing that I want to mention real quick, and that is that as you progress through the game, and we've done this a little bit before, but we did this twice in this session, you get to sit on your throne as Inquisitor and judge the defeated enemies of the main story quest beforehand. This was something that was really cool that we got to do this time, that I think is another thing that really suffers if you haven't played previous Dragon Ages. So last week we defeated Aramund, something like that. He's like one of Corypheus's lieutenants, and he was trying to convert all the wardens into demons, so we rocked his shit up, and then we get to decide what to do with him. One of the options I believe for him was to give him like the Tranquil. I think that's how they phrase it. I'm not totally clear, because being a Dragon Age virgin who's never played one of these Dragon Age games before, I don't know what the fuck that is. And I think that's a real problem. Maybe that's just a me problem. And you know what? Totally fair. If you want, go ahead and comment down below. Tell me, hey, that's a you problem. I don't care about your opinion. That's fine. That's fair. But personally, I will say, like, it really takes away from that decision, from that choice, if one of the options is kind of a mystery to me. And there was another one with a warden after Corypheus's little wizard guy that had the same issue, where I think they wanted, one of the options was to send her to the Deep Roads. And I'm like, maybe we should send her to the Deep Roads. Tell me now, is that a bad place? Like, I really had no idea. Yeah, I think that's an issue. Normally, after I get all of this kind of stuff out of the way, I would talk about some of the gameplay aspects, but I think I've talked about that a pretty good amount throughout the story. I think at this point, like, gameplay and story have kind of like married into one, and in some cases that really has worked for me, and in a lot of others that really hasn't. I think that's unfortunate. That's something that, like, I think I'll expand on when I finish the game and when I do a full review. For the time being, yeah, just I want to let you guys know, I think when the gameplay interferes with the story, I think that's really the worst part of this game. And when the gameplay lets the story just tell its story, I think that's the best part of the game. Another thing I'll just mention at the end here that I enjoyed this week was discovering that Skyhold has a few new recruits who specifically come from side quests that I've completed in the open world. That was a real treat to discover this week. It was really cool seeing, like, oh, there's like a new guy in my tavern, and he's like, maybe he's not a fighter, maybe he's not the kind of guy that I can take with me on a mission, but he's decided, after seeing my heroics and my bravery on one of my side quests, that he's going to come to Skyhold, and god damn it, he's going to do whatever he can to help me, even if it's just sweeping my floors. And I really like that. I really like having an HQ that becomes more populated the more that you do in the open world. I thought that was a really cool little addition to this. Anyways, guys, that's about all I have for you today. This episode ran a little long, but stick with it. We're getting, I think, pretty close to the end of Dragon Age Inquisition, and we have a lot of content planned for you before the Veilguard comes out. So please, if you would like to, please subscribe to the channel. It helps out a lot. I'm really gunning for 500 subs by the end of the year, and we still have a little ways to go. So hopefully you'll help me achieve that goal, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.